People spend thousands to experience the great outdoors, only to completely lose their minds when nature actually acts like nature. Today, we are exposing 55 of the absolute dumbest complaints about hunting and fishing trips ever recorded. From angry tourists demanding heated lakes to grown men crying over slimy fish, these real reviews will make you question how humanity survived this long. This is pure, unfiltered delusion. 1. A furious dad left a scathing review for a deep-sea fishing charter off the coast of Florida because the fish they caught were incredibly slimy and splashed ocean water all over his expensive khakis. He explicitly stated that the captain should have provided towels to dry the marine life off before bringing them aboard. Imagine paying big money to drag a living creature out of the ocean and then being wildly offended that it is not dry cleaned first. Have you ever met someone this hilariously disconnected from reality? 2. When you book a guided elk hunt in Colorado, you are paying for a professional tracker, not a scripted movie scene. One hunter demanded a complete refund because the animals were actively hiding from him. His exact grievance was that the outfitter promised a high success rate, but the elk refused to step out into the open clearing and stand perfectly still. This guy basically expected the wildlife to surrender and present themselves on a silver platter just because he bought a shiny new rifle. 3. Remote cabins in Montana sound like an absolute paradise for anyone looking to escape modern distractions. But one genius left a 1-star rating complaining that the isolated mountain lake had 0 cellular service. They were outraged that they could not stream tutorials on how to tie a fishing knot while sitting on the boat. Why bother learning the absolute basics of your hobby at home when you can just blame nature for not installing a cell tower right next to the wild trout? 4. The entire point of wearing camouflage is to blend into your surroundings and stay completely hidden from your prey. Yet a woman in Georgia wrote a massive complaint to a sporting goods store because her husband vanished into the woods and she spent 2 hours looking for him. She actually blamed the manufacturer for making the jacket pattern too realistic. If your outdoor gear works so flawlessly that it causes a mild marital crisis, that sounds like a premium feature, not a manufacturing defect. 5. Trekking miles deep into a humid Louisiana bayou means leaving every single modern convenience far behind you. One highly agitated tourist left a brutal 1-star review for his swamp tour because there were 0 porcelain toilets hidden behind the ancient cypress trees. He genuinely expected the outfitter to build a fully functioning, climate-controlled restroom facility directly in the middle of a massive alligator habitat just for paying guests. Expecting luxury plumbing while standing knee-deep in wild marshland is just brilliantly absurd. 6. Late autumn in the deep woods of Oregon guarantees you are going to encounter a massive amount of wet dirt. One luxury hunter wrote a blistering email to a private lodge because the muddy trails completely ruined his brand-new, ridiculously expensive designer boots. He seriously argued that a high-end facility should pave their hunting trails with asphalt to accommodate wealthy guests. Would you ever invite a guy like this to your camp? Or would you just leave him stranded in the parking lot? 7. Anyone stepping onto a boat on the open ocean should probably expect the water to have some heavy waves. A family visiting California actually demanded their money back from a charter company because the ocean was moving too much and making their teenager dizzy. They insisted the captain should have driven the boat to a flatter part of the Pacific. Imagine thinking the captain of a small fishing vessel has a magical joystick that controls the gravitational pull of the moon and the ocean tides. 8. Waking up long before sunrise is practically the golden rule if you actually want a solid chance at spotting a deer. However, an enraged customer from New York left a brutal review for his guide because he was woken up at 4 in the morning. He claimed he was on vacation, and waking up before 8 was a violation of his human rights. The guide was basically treated like an abusive villain simply for trying to help a deeply lazy man shoot a buck before the forest got entirely too hot. 9. Every time you cast a line into the ocean, you are basically playing a wild lottery with what might bite. One guy threw an absolute temper tantrum in Florida after he caught a small shark instead of the red snapper he specifically requested. He loudly accused the charter crew of putting shark-attracting bait on his line on purpose as a prank. Nature does not read your personal wish list before feeding. How do people this clueless survive daily life without constant adult supervision? 10. The wilderness is naturally filled with millions of tiny creatures that do not care about your personal space. A hunter in Louisiana gave a guided swamp tour a 0-star rating because there were too many mosquitoes flying around his face. He strongly felt the management should have sprayed the entire 100-acre wetland with bug repellent before his arrival. Expecting someone to fumigate a massive natural swamp just so your delicate skin remains flawless is a special level of pure delusion. 11. Freshly caught seafood has a very distinct, earthy aroma that most seasoned anglers genuinely love. A furious reviewer from Ohio, however, demanded financial compensation because the salmon he pulled from a rushing river smelled entirely too fishy. He firmly believed the water was polluted and argued that wild fish should smell completely neutral, just like the frozen filets at his local grocery store. Do you think this guy washes his chicken with dish soap before cooking it too? 12. Sitting silently in a hidden duck blind requires absolute patience and zero sudden movements. Yet one wealthy corporate executive threw a massive fit because the wild songbirds in the surrounding trees were chirping too loudly and giving him a terrible headache. He actually asked the hunting guide to walk into the brush and scare the little birds away so he could focus on waiting for the ducks in peace. The sheer arrogance required to tell Mother Nature to lower its voice is honestly quite impressive. 13. Walking through untouched wilderness means you are inevitably going to walk face first into a giant spider web. An extremely dramatic camper in Arkansas called emergency services to report a hostile insect attack after ruining a wild arachnid home. He strongly demanded the state dispatch a professional cleaning crew to dust the upper canopy of the national forest. Expecting a dedicated maid service to sweep the ancient woods clean of tiny spiders is a staggering level of absolute privilege. 14. Applying dark green grease over your face is a standard tactic to hide your shiny skin from sharp-eyed predators. One incredibly vain influencer left a scathing review for a hunting lodge because the mandatory camouflage paint caused a mild breakout on her forehead. She threatened to sue the outfitter for ruining her expensive daily skincare routine and demanded a refund for her luxury facial serums. Maybe next time stick to a filtered selfie on your couch instead of trekking through the muddy wilderness. 15. Using live worms is basically step 1 of fishing for absolute beginners. This simple fact completely shocked a father taking his kids out on a peaceful pond in Kentucky. He yelled at the bait shop owner for selling him dirty earthworms that were wriggling around in actual soil. He insisted that the worms should be washed and sterilized before being sold to the general public. Imagine having to scrub a tiny worm with a sponge just so a grown man does not get mud on his perfectly clean fingernails. 16. Climbing 20 feet up a tree into a metal platform is a normal part of waiting for deer. An incredibly lazy hunter from New Jersey filed an official complaint with a guided outfitter because his assigned tree stand did not feature a proper wooden staircase. He called the metal climbing pegs a safety hazard and asked why there was no elevator system installed in the middle of a dense pine forest. Do these people honestly expect an escalator to take them straight to the top of a wild oak tree? 17. Getting splashed by the ocean is an unavoidable reality when you step onto a fast-moving offshore charter vessel. A completely outraged woman in California yelled at the deckhand because the sea spray got into her mouth and tasted completely disgusting. She firmly insisted the marina management should dump thousands of pounds of artificial sweetener into the bay to counteract the harsh natural saltiness. Trying to manually flavor the Pacific Ocean is a uniquely hilarious vacation demand. 18. Reflecting sunlight is literally just a basic property of large bodies of water. A furious woman on a guided fishing trip in Florida gave the company 1 star because the sun glare off the ocean gave her a horrible squint. She loudly suggested that the captain should have brought a massive canopy to shade the entire ocean around their boat. The captain was genuinely stunned into silence by a human being who expected an umbrella large enough to cover the actual sea. 19. Leaving a cooler full of fresh meat unattended in the deep woods is basically ringing a dinner bell for local wildlife. A group of campers in Alaska were absolutely outraged when a black bear wandered into their site and ate their entire stash of expensive steaks. They filed a formal complaint with the park rangers, claiming the government should train the bears to stay away from private property. You really cannot reason with a hungry apex predator that just found a free all-you-can-eat buffet. 20. Conservation rules exist strictly to ensure that fish populations do not completely collapse overnight. A highly aggressive tourist visiting a catch-and-release stream in Montana called the local sheriff to report a robbery. The crime in question was the game warden forcing him to throw a protected trout back into the river. He firmly believed that once he touched the fish, it became his personal legal property forever. Calling emergency services over a wet fish is a fantastic way to become a local laughingstock. 21. Walking through a dry autumn forest is obviously going to make some noise. An incredibly irritated hiker in Maine demanded a full refund from his guide because the fallen leaves were way too crunchy. He seriously claimed the outfitter should have raked the entire forest floor before his arrival so he could sneak around in total silence. Could you honestly imagine paying someone to vacuum the wilderness just so your heavy boots do not make a sound? 22. You would think people know that deep-sea predators are not exactly known for their friendly smiles. After pulling a large barracuda onto a charter boat in Florida, a terrified tourist immediately threatened to sue the captain. Her exact complaint was that the fish looked entirely too aggressive, and its sharp teeth gave her a severe panic attack. She genuinely felt the ocean should only contain cute, cartoonish animals that do not look like they want to bite you. Expecting a wild predator to look cuddly is completely delusional. 23. It is completely normal to get turned around in the deep woods, which is exactly why you hire a guide. One absolute genius from Chicago lost his temper in the middle of a national forest because there were 0 street signs. He wrote a furious letter to the Park Service demanding they install neon directional arrows on the old pine trees so people could easily find their way back to the parking lot. Nature is strictly not a shopping mall with a helpful directory map. 24. Small live minnows are the absolute standard when you are trying to catch a massive lake trout. A young couple visiting a resort in Minnesota threw a massive fit at the bait shop because they thought the tiny silverfish were entirely too adorable to be used as bait. They ended up buying the whole bucket, naming every single one of them, and releasing them back into the marina. The local fishermen simply stared in absolute disbelief at the rescue mission taking place right next to the boat ramp. 25. Animals out in the wild possess an incredible sense of smell that can detect a human from a mile away if the breeze is right. A very wealthy client in Texas got extremely hostile with his guide when the wind suddenly changed direction. He demanded the outfitter set up massive industrial fans in the brush to blow his expensive cologne scent back toward the highway. How exactly do you plan to control the Earth's atmosphere on a tight vacation budget just to impress a local whitetail deer? 26. Nobody ever warned this lawyer from Boston that eating a peaceful lunch on the deck of a boat makes you a prime target for local birds. He tried to force his fishing captain to call the Coast Guard after a seagull swooped down and stole his expensive turkey wrap. He argued that the marina was legally responsible for the criminal actions of the wild birds flying in their airspace. You cannot press grand larceny charges against a hungry pelican or a random seagull. 27. Booking a weekend for ice fishing literally guarantees that the temperatures will be well below freezing. Yet a furious reviewer in Wisconsin gave a local outfitter 1 star because sitting on the frozen lake was way too cold for his liking. He specifically complained that the company failed to install heated floors inside the temporary canvas tent. Expecting premium indoor heating while literally standing on a solid block of wild winter ice is pure comedy. 28. Absolute silence under an oak tree is a great strategy until the local wildlife decides you are officially trespassing. A hunter in Pennsylvania stormed back to his cabin and wrote a huge complaint because a squirrel kept throwing acorns at his expensive camouflage hat. He insisted the lodge owner should march out there and evict the squirrel from the premises for harassing a paying customer. Does he think the forest animals signed a polite behavior contract before he booked his expensive weekend getaway? 29. Only a fashion-obsessed tourist in Colorado would actually return an entire set of expensive outdoor apparel because the dark green pattern completely clashed with her blue eyes. She strongly suggested the store start selling bright pastel camouflage so she could look fabulous in her outdoor selfies while hiking through the brush. Being completely invisible to local wildlife apparently takes a massive backseat to high fashion when your personal social media presence is on the line. 30. When you drag a massive fish out of the water, you are definitely going to experience some serious splashing and flopping. A terrified guy on a freshwater trip in Nevada locked himself inside the boat cabin because his freshly caught bass was moving around on the deck. He yelled at the captain to administer a mild sedative to the fish so it would stop jumping around and scaring him. It takes a special kind of person to demand medical anesthesia for a random river fish just to avoid getting their sneakers wet. 31. Nobody ever promised that wild lakes were filled with crystal clear, purified drinking water. Yet an incredibly furious tourist in Texas demanded a massive refund from a local fishing resort because the pond was entirely too brown. He loudly insisted that the management should have installed giant pool filters to keep the water aesthetically pleasing for his vacation photos. He was completely baffled by the concept of natural mud and algae existing in an outdoor environment. 32. Getting a massive tug on your line is the exact adrenaline rush that most anglers dream of experiencing. A businessman from New York completely disagreed and yelled at his Florida charter captain because a giant tarpon pulled entirely too hard on his expensive rod. He filed a formal grievance stating the fish was overly aggressive and caused unnecessary strain on his shoulders. He genuinely expected the massive ocean creatures to politely surrender and float gently toward the boat. 33. Wildlife photographers and nature watchers spend weeks waiting to catch a glimpse of a majestic buck in the woods. One deeply disappointed tourist in Montana wrote a scathing review of a guided scouting trip because the deer they spotted had asymmetrical antlers. He firmly accused the outfitter of planting defective, ugly animals in the forest just to ruin his expensive photography portfolio. The sheer audacity to critique the genetic aesthetics of a wild forest animal is truly mind-boggling. 34. Purchasing expensive waterproof clothing implies you are actually going to step outside into the harsh weather. A hiker in Washington state was absolutely livid when a sudden downpour caused the outside of his high-end camouflage jacket to get completely wet. Even though he was bone dry underneath, he threw a massive tantrum at the sporting goods store and claimed the moisture ruined his stylish outfit. Expecting rain gear to magically repel water like an invisible force field is peak delusion. 35. Chartering a private vessel for a deep-sea adventure requires a basic understanding of ocean physics. A wealthy family visiting the coast of Maine forced their captain to turn around immediately because the bright yellow paint on the deck was supposedly causing their intense seasickness. They demanded the company completely repaint the entire boat to a soothing pastel blue before they would agree to cast a single line. The captain just stared at them while the ocean waves continued to rock the hull. 36. Packing premium snacks is essential for a long day of sitting quietly in a camouflaged woodland blind. A very angry outdoorsman in Ohio demanded financial compensation from the State Park Service after a wild raccoon stole his imported Italian meats. He argued that since the animal lived on government land, the local rangers were strictly responsible for reimbursing his ruined luxury charcuterie board. Blaming the federal government because a masked woodland bandit outsmarted you for some prosciutto is absolutely hilarious. 37. The entire concept of catch and release fishing is designed to protect local ecosystems and keep the waters populated. A deeply sensitive tourist in Colorado actually cried and left a terrible review because the trout she gently placed back into the stream swam away entirely too fast. She complained that the creature did not take a single moment to appreciate her mercy or acknowledge her kindness. Expecting a terrified, wet animal to express deep emotional gratitude is a staggering level of human entitlement. 38. Riding an all-terrain vehicle through the rugged backcountry is supposed to be a messy, thrilling experience. A very loud customer from California rented a heavy-duty four-wheeler for a remote scouting trip and later demanded a refund because the tires got covered in thick clay. He honestly believed the rental company should have provided a paved, mud-free route through the dense, swampy wilderness. Renting an off-road machine and complaining about the dirt is completely ridiculous. 39. Escaping the constant buzzing of modern technology is exactly why people retreat to hidden cabins in the mountains. One deeply addicted smartphone user threw a massive fit at a Wyoming lodge because his remote observation tower lacked a high-speed internet connection. He specifically complained that he could not live stream his quiet woodland experience to his social media followers. Going deep into the isolated wilderness just to stare at a glowing screen completely defeats the entire purpose of being outside. 40. Deep woods. Insect repellent is specifically formulated with harsh chemicals to keep massive swarms of biting bugs away. A furious glamper in Georgia wrote a long corporate complaint because the mandatory bug spray completely overpowered the scent of her expensive botanical perfume. She strongly suggested that the outdoor guides start capturing the mosquitoes by hand instead of forcing guests to smell like an industrial pharmacy. She genuinely prioritized smelling like fresh roses over being protected from hundreds of itchy insect bites. 41. Jumping into a freezing lake at dawn is a brutal but completely normal part of retrieving dropped fishing gear. A very pampered guy in Michigan filed a formal grievance against a state park because the natural lake water was absolutely freezing. He argued that the state should install massive underground water heaters to keep the recreational areas at a comfortable swimming pool temperature. Can you even fathom the electric bill required to heat an entire ecosystem just to save one drop tackle box? 42. You can have the most expensive bait on the planet, but nobody can physically force a fish to open its mouth. A very angry tourist in Texas threatened to sue his fishing guide because the bass simply were not biting that day. He claimed the guide clearly fed the fish the night before just to sabotage his vacation. Yes, this grown adult genuinely believed a random guy took a midnight boat ride across a massive lake to personally hand-feed thousands of wild fish just to ruin his Tuesday morning. 43. Catfish are famous for their love of incredibly foul-smelling bait, which is exactly why anglers use fermented cheese and rotting liver. A deeply offended fisherman in Mississippi actually sued a local bait shop because the stink bait he purchased smelled entirely too bad. He claimed the horrible odor completely ruined his expensive leather truck seats on the drive over to the river. Buying a product literally called stink bait and then crying about the aroma is a profound level of human stupidity. 44. Sleeping under the stars is supposed to be a peaceful way to connect with the wild before a big morning trek. An exhausted camper in Oregon stormed out of the woods and demanded a refund from the Forest Service because an owl was hooting all night. She firmly insisted that a park ranger should have climbed the massive pine tree to politely ask the nocturnal bird to keep the noise down. Do people actually think forest rangers are just glorified hotel managers for the local wildlife? 45. Scouting for wildlife requires you to sit incredibly still and observe animals acting naturally in their own unpredictable habitat. A frustrated amateur photographer from California complained to his guide because the wild whitetail bucks refused to look directly at his expensive camera lens. He loudly accused the outfitter of bringing him to a defective part of the woods where the animals were not properly trained for outdoor tourism. Nature is absolutely not a highly produced photo shoot waiting for your creative direction. 46. Navigating a remote river sometimes means dealing with unpredictable natural obstacles blocking your chosen path. A furious kayaker in Maine called the local authorities because a massive beaver dam completely blocked his access to a prime fishing spot. He demanded that the police come out and arrest the beavers for illegally obstructing a public waterway without a proper building permit. Imagine trying to read Miranda rights to a giant aquatic rodent just because a guy from the city wants to cast his fishing line. 47. Chartering a rough offshore fishing vessel is all about battling massive waves and reeling in giant ocean predators. One wealthy client from Seattle threw a massive tantrum on a Hawaiian boat because the captain did not have a fully stocked espresso machine on board. He literally threatened to swim back to shore if nobody could handcraft him a venti iced caramel macchiato right there on the deck. Expecting a professional barista to serve you while getting slammed by salty ocean swells is utterly hilarious. 48. Deep forests are naturally packed with thousands of massive plants growing completely unchecked for centuries. A highly annoyed hiker in Vermont submitted a formal written complaint to the State Department because there were entirely too many trees blocking his view of the mountains. He strongly suggested they clear-cut a giant path through the protected wilderness, just so tourists would not have to walk around the giant oaks. Why do people visit the deep woods if they absolutely hate looking at wood? 49. Night fishing is a fantastic way to catch certain nocturnal species if you rely on stealth and total darkness. A highly confused guy in South Carolina demanded his money back from a lake marina because the full moon was entirely too bright and gave away his secret position. He seriously argued that the rental company should only operate on nights when they can completely guarantee total cloud cover. You really have to admire the pure confidence of a man trying to complain to the manager about the lunar cycle. 50. Catching a hungry fish inevitably means dealing with a hook safely stuck inside its mouth. A squeamish dad in Texas absolutely lost his mind and yelled at a local guide because a large catfish swallowed the bait entirely too fast. He demanded the outfitter redesign their fishing gear so the fish could simply hold the bait politely in their lips without actually getting hooked. He essentially wanted to invent a magical magnetic fishing rod that requires absolutely zero effort or messy physical contact. 51. Wild hogs are notorious for rolling around in thick mud to cool off during the sweltering heat. A highly disgusted hunter in Texas wrote a furious email to a private ranch because the feral pigs ruined his aesthetic vacation photos with their filthy appearance. He strongly felt the property owners should install outdoor showers and forcefully bathe the wild animals before letting guests see them. Expecting a massive aggressive boar to enjoy a luxurious spa day is completely unhinged. 52. The gravitational pull of the moon causes ocean tides to rise and fall predictably every single day. A deeply confused tourist in South Carolina demanded a massive refund from a coastal resort because all the water suddenly vanished from underneath the fishing pier. She accused the state government of secretly draining the ocean to save money on marina maintenance. Blaming local politicians for the basic scientific mechanics of the lunar cycle is a stunning display of pure ignorance. 53. Purchasing a small cage of live crickets is a fantastic strategy for catching panfish on a quiet summer afternoon. A highly sensitive fisherman in Georgia completely melted down and threw his entire bait box into the lake because the tiny insects were chirping too loudly on his boat. He left a scathing review for the local bait shop, demanding they legally mute the bugs before selling them. The absolute entitlement required to demand a silent cricket is genuinely hard to comprehend. 54. Conservation laws dictate exactly how many fish you can legally harvest to prevent totally destroying the local aquatic ecosystem. A very aggressive guy in Florida completely lost his temper when a park ranger informed him he had reached his daily snapper limit. He argued that buying a $20 fishing license gave him infinite access to every single living creature currently swimming in the Gulf of Mexico. Nature is definitely not a cheap subscription service with unlimited downloads. 55. Tracking game requires you to be perfectly positioned in the woods long before the first hint of morning light. A deeply irritated novice in Montana filed a formal complaint with his outfitter because the wilderness was entirely too dark at 5 in the morning. He literally demanded the lodge string up massive stadium lights across the dense pine canopy so he could easily spot a deer without straining his eyes. Trying to magically turn a wild forest into a brightly lit parking lot is pure comedy. Mother Nature clearly does not care about 5-star luxury standards or expensive designer boots. Who was the most aggressively stupid person on this entire list? Name and shame them in the comments right now, because I want to hear your absolute harshest verdicts. If you want more insanely ridiculous stories that prove common sense is officially dead, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel immediately.